So I'm glad you guys came today. Hooray, we have good weather so far and good roads, so we don't have to worry. I'm Jennifer Hahn, aka Jenn. I'm the Lower St. Croix outreach agronomist and also extension educator. So I work from Rock Creek, Minnesota down to Hastings, get into Isanti and Anoka counties a little bit too. You guys are the southern portion of the watershed that I work in. And I know a lot of you were at the field day last summer at Tim's, which was a lot of fun. So it's good to see you guys again. And you know, you get phone calls from me and emails from me. So thank you for answering the phone and talking to me. I appreciate that. All right, so let's get started. I'm not going to go too far in depth because when I talk about soil, I love talking about it and I can do it all day. So we're just going to hit the tip of the iceberg. Oh, what is that? All right. We turn it off and on again, right? Oh, it's just working too. Oh, yeah. All right. So the goal of soil management. The goal of soil management. Some people talk about, you know, we need to protect the soil. We need to do everything we can to take care of it, and we do. But how I like talking about it is improving it and protecting it for agricultural production. I like working to improve the soils while we're still in egg production because that's what we're doing, and to continue to make a living, we need to keep it in egg production. So how do we improve the soil while it's still in production? So what is soil health? We all hear about it. Basically, soil has 5 major functions, and we just need our soils to be able to function. Infiltrate and hold on to water, regulate or have the nutrient cycling, provide physical support so we can stand and build on it, have living organisms in it. And that's the biggest difference between dirt and soil. Dirt does not have living organisms in it. Soil does. And then filter and buffer chemicals and things like that. So when you're thinking of and discussing soil functions, it's kind of like this. And it's not that it's complicated, it's just each item that you think about relates to all the other items. And so there's no linear way of going through and talking about soils and management of soils, because this item here affects this, and this. So I try to keep it as linear as possible, but everything relates to everything. So when we disturb the soil, we're breaking apart the soil structure. Our clods, we're actually burning off and releasing carbon, so reducing our organic matter, cutting off the pores and channels that the roots and the worms and other soil critters have created in there, so that we cut that off and the water can't infiltrate very well. Increases the erosion potential, breaks up the good fungi, and then all those soil organisms in there, you know, they're working away, they're building their homes, they're helping the plants, and then once we disturb the soil, they need to rebuild their community again. When we go and talk to 5th graders mostly about it, we ask them, okay, what if, you know, in your community, what if a tornado came in? What would you do? We say, well, we'd rebuild and everything would be fine. Yeah, absolutely. What if a tornado came through your community like 3 times a year? What would you do? They said, we'd move. Why would we stay there? Same thing with those low soil critters. If we keep disturbing their habitat, they're not going to stick around, and they move really slowly. They don't have big old legs like we do, you know. So with the erosion in Minnesota, the average erosion rate is 5.2 tons per acre. In the southern part of Washington County, it's a little bit higher than that because we have a lot of hills, we have a lot of steep slopes. But with that average erosion rate, that equates to, you know, 14.5 pounds per acre per year of nitrogen, 65 pounds of phosphorus, almost 22 pounds of potassium. Now I did this valuation a couple years ago, so it's a little low. couple years ago, that valuation of nutrients was $45 to $70 an acre. Now it's 70 plus an acre that we're losing just in our average annual erosion. With the soil that's leaving the fields, the amount of nutrients that are in it. So let's start at the top. We'll try to have some kind of linear look at this. So the raindrop impact, when raindrops fall and hit the ground, they can hit the ground at up to 20 miles an hour. So when those raindrops are coming down, we're punching the soil, over and over. It's like getting punched in the face. And if you don't have any protection over that soil is taking the brunt of all of that pressure, and it actually breaks apart your soil aggregates when it hits it. And so what we want to do is we want to reduce that amount of pressure coming at it with either living vegetation or residue, because then it protects it and it takes that energy out of the raindrops. So we want to keep it covered. This is what happens when we don't keep it covered. It breaks that soil structure apart on the surface, and then all the soils, they kind of like flow around because they're not aggregated together. And any pore, crack, or open channel you have at the surface, it'll fill it in, seal it off, and then your topsoil, it won't let the water infiltrate. And when it dries out, you get that cracking because the soil is desperately trying to open itself back up again. You'll also see that with heavy manure application though too. So there's a difference with that. So infiltration. So we go past the very top of it. Now we want to find out how that infiltrates into our soil. So average infiltration rates with conventional tillage operations is about half an inch per hour. That's what we can handle before it starts ponding and running off. That's an average. Now, as we increase our soil health practices, we're averaging 8 inches per hour. This was in the southern Minnesota in the fall. I need to conduct some testing up here to determine what it's going to be up here. But that's with clay loam soils that we got our average 8 inches per hour. So we can handle 8 inches per hour rain before it washed off, or before it started ponding. I've had guys up much higher than that, but it takes a while to get there. You need to get your soils opened up and aggregated to be able to allow that. And that was not factored in with the surface being covered or not. So when we increase our infiltration, it protects that soil surface because the water can infiltrate. It's not going to erode and take that soil with it, and reduces the crop stress with a reduced ponding. We don't want our seedlings to get drowned out. That's not fun. Or eroded away down the hill. No, with compaction, there's a lot of info on this, but really what I want to show with this compaction, in a compacted soil, about 75% of what's in our clod is actually soil. In undisturbed soils, only half of it should actually be soil. The other half is pore space for air and water. And as we compact the soils, we're reducing the amount within that same clod for the air and water. Then we have issues with diseases because we need air to be able to be in our system, and we need that water to be able to infiltrate and run through. So with compaction, we have less nutrient and water uptake from our crops. We're decreasing population and diversity of soil organisms, which you can find out later, really hurts us. Slower germination, delayed planting, loss of nitrogen to the atmosphere. Compaction is just all around not helpful to our productivity. So to reduce compaction, we want to stay off wet soils. Easier said than done. I know I'm not a patient person, no, but it makes a big difference. And what really can help is getting more roots in your ground, because the roots, especially with some of our cover crops, they can break through compaction better than our corn and soybeans. At 250 psi, our corn and soybean roots, they're starting to struggle. They're having a hard time. You get up to 275, you're taking a lot of energy to break through that compaction. So if we use radishes, I really like cereal rye, annual rye to help break that compaction up. It works wonders. Reducing tillage, increasing organic matter. Organic matter, I'll talk about that a little bit later too, but it's amazing. It helps balance out so many things, and it really does help kind of build resilience against compaction too. So how to monitor it, you can get fancy and get a penetrometer for like $200, $250. Don't want to do that, you can use a wire flag or a tile probe. And you don't get the PSI reading, but you can feel it as you push it through. Because when we reduce our tillage, for many, many years later, you still find your old plow pan or where you were disking. It takes a while for that to come out. So a really easy way, just take a wire flag out there and push it down. You want to look at roots. Are they growing vertically or horizontally? My favorite though, use a shovel. And if you dig a hole, you'll learn so much. You'll be able to see your soil structure, see if there's worms out there. And when you're digging, you will feel when you hit a layer of compaction. But that's why I like gaining weight, because then I can actually get the shovel on the ground easier, you know? If you're too thin, it's really hard. Yeah, I don't like working hard. I like being efficient, you know? So, right? Or pizza, yeah. Right? And then also indicator reads. So just easy driving by, trying to see what's going on. Now, some of these weeds you might get for other reasons, like if you bring in manure from somewhere else or, you know, what have you. But hard pans, bindweed, quackgrass, mustards, velvet leaf, horse nettle, pineapple weed. I used to see pineapple weed all the time. I don't see it anymore. Plantains, mostly you see that in your yards. Dandelions, knotweed, mare's tail. And the cool thing to think about is a lot of these plants, they have a deep taproot. So when you see plants with a deep taproot or a strong taproot growing, there's compaction. That plant is growing specifically to help break that up. And then if compacted and poorly drained, you'll see more sorrels, dock, horsetail, lady's thumb, and foxtail. I had to look up lady's thumb. I'm not really familiar with that one, but it's on the list. Okay, I do that. So the compaction directly relates to our soil structure. Oh, this gets fun too. So out on the table with the handouts, I had a lid with different soil clouds on it. You can see they look very different from each other. One of them, it had all those little tiny chunks all stuck together. That's soil structure. That's beautiful. That's what we want to see. The roots can easily get through that along with air and water. And we keep our nutrient exchange going. And then those other clods, we would call that, it's hard to see on here, call that massive structure, where it's just a big block. You don't see, you know, any rounded curves. You're not seeing, we want to see like the cottage cheese, you know, the little clumps. That's exactly what we're going for, because that way the air and the water and the roots can get through versus getting stuck at the top. And then later on in August, when the rain tap shuts off, if we weren't able to infiltrate our water, our subsoil is dry. We have nothing to bank on later on in the growing season. That stinks. Yeah, that available oxygen, that is huge. Without oxygen, we're going to have nutrient issues and we're going to have disease issues. It helps improve our trafficability, because if we get that water to infiltrate, you can get out in the field and drive a lot sooner than if all that water is just smushed in that top inch or so, just sitting there trying to infiltrate. And it helps the soil organism life and activity, as well as our crop roots. So to develop soil structure, there's also a slight chemical process. I put biological and physical. Chemical is pretty minor, but you can see most of it is biological. Physical, you know, we got our freezing, thawing, wetting, drying, roots penetrating. But our biological, organic matter decomposition. So as our crop residues break down, that adds to the organic portion of the soil, which helps build soil structure, but also just our soil critters breaking that down, exuding their glues, defecating, binding that all together. That helps build our soil structure. The exudates from plant roots, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. That is really exciting. Fungus, spine roots, the burrow lining. So when worms burrow through the soil, they want to be lazy and efficient as well. So when they make their burrows, the goo on the outside of them line the channels so that they can keep using it. They don't have to keep forming it. And that really helps build that soil structure too. And fecal pellets, however you want to say it. Why organic matter matters, Paul. That's like the number one thing. If you could focus on organic matter, everything else will fall into place. Nutrient cycling, availability, and retention, organic matter. Clays too, but really organic matter operates better about it. You can increase your CEC because of increasing organic matter. So if you have sandy soils, you're not going to go out there and add a bunch of clay to increase your nutrient holding capacity, but if you increase your organic matter, boom, you got it. Helps soil organisms, the water retention and infiltration, soil structure, actually helps also to balance the pH of the soils, which is huge for nutrient availability and cycling, and it reduces erosion. So we have all this carbon in our air. When we grow things, we don't have to pull the carbon from the soil. We can pull it from the air and put it back into your soil with unharvested crops, or even high residue crops like small grains, corn. We're only taking the grains off of those. We're leaving all that carbon behind. Utilizing manure, wonderful. But you want to know if there's weed seed in it too. Reducing tillage and controlling erosion. So organic matter, 1% of organic matter can provide up to, now these are annually, so 1% of organic matter annually, we can get up to 20 pounds of nitrogen. We don't have to pay for that. 5.5 pounds of phosphorus, 2.5 pounds of sulfur per year. So that reduces the amount of nutrients that we need to provide. And it holds 16,500 gallons of plant available water. It holds more water than that, but it's not all plant available. So we need that, especially in August or last year, July, when that comes. So within 3 years, we've been able to increase organic matter by 1% with no-till and cover crop on sandy soils. That was amazing. It was very intense. Also in 3 years, we were able to increase organic matter by 0.7% with no-till on a loam soil. And then we're increasing infiltration from 2.5 inches per hour to 20 inches per hour with no-till and cover crops. And that reduced the erosion rate by 26%. So increasing our ability to infiltrate the water greatly reduces our erosion. Huge. So residue management nutrients. I love this. So this is bacteria culture, because the bacteria are in a culture, a petri dish, but they're also playing, all right, I think. So soil scientists, we have dry centrifuge. I love that picture. So residue management nutrients, carbon to nitrogen ratio, huge. So like 20, 30 years ago when we were promoting, everybody do no-till, it's great, it's fantastic. One, we didn't have the right equipment, but two, we did not think about or understand the carbon to nitrogen ratio. So if you want to increase the amount of residue that's out on your field, you need to have a high carbon to nitrogen ratio. Soil organisms, the ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio is 24:1 for releasing nutrients in your soil. If you have a lower carbon to nitrogen ratio than 24:1, you're going to break down that residue really, really quickly, and your nitrogen is going to be very available. It'll flow very freely. So we can think about using our crop residues and cover crops to manage our carbon to nitrogen ratio. If you want to lock that nitrogen up in the fall and in the spring when nothing is growing, we're not needing it, high residues. But how quickly are we going to need that nitrogen to become available again the following year? So in a soybean year, we can lock that up. We don't really need to worry about it. But in a corn year, we don't want to lock that nitrogen up too hard because we want to be able to let that nitrogen come back for the corn. So we can utilize that with crop residues and cover crops. And you don't have to worry about like, how do I exactly get to 24:1? You look at your fields and you look at how quickly your residue is decomposing. On our family farm in northern Chisago County, we've been using vertical till. You know, we till, yes, but it's a 2% angle, 2 inches down. We're getting there. But this spring, so this was our 6th year of doing that. We raised corn, soybeans. And this spring, after they went over with the vertical till, they didn't do it at all last fall. I almost cried. I felt like I was gut punched. Where is all the residue? I'm like, you guys lied to me. You guys worked this last fall. What is happening? Oh, our soil biology finally got onto the ship and is operating. And now our carbon to nitrogen ratio is reducing. And so our crop residues are cycling even faster. Wonderful, because back then the no-till year, the very beginning, we just kept piling up residue. Like, we can't, how do we handle this? Oh, now we understand. Now we've got it. I think we're gonna reduce our ammonium sulfate applications though too. We don't need any help breaking that residue down. So thinking about your carbon to nitrogen ratio, your amount of residue, want to think of long-lasting residue or easily decompose, legumes, brassicas like radishes, turnip, those all break down relatively fast. Your grasses and grains, they're going to break down slower, but also depending on how mature they get. If they're really small and young, they're going to break down pretty quickly. But as you start, building the maturity in them, they'll hold on to that nitrogen a lot longer and take longer to decompose. So are you wanting to build that organic matter, or do you need it to cycle so that you can keep moving with the nitrogen? So that and depending on how you apply your nitrogen too, if you put it on top of all that residue, well, some of it's going to get locked up into that high residue. So improving your nitrogen cycling, organic matter. It holds on to it, but it also cycles it and releases it in a way that's beneficial to our crops. Reduce tillage, reduce our compaction, build our soil structure, utilize nutrient management. I know, but it's good for the pocketbook. Add plant diversity if possible, and then think about that carbon to nitrogen ratio for managing the residues and the nutrients on your fields. Benefits of soil biology. They make it all happen. Without them, we're stuck. I hid one of my slides about fallow syndrome. Do you know what causes fallow syndrome? Nothing growing there. And then what happens? Your soil organisms, some of them die, some of them are pretty much hibernating. And so you grow your corn the next year, your phosphorus isn't available because the lack of the soil organisms in the soil. So if we increase our soil biology, we can reduce our input costs because they'll be cycling our nutrients by cycling the residues out there, making the plants available. We've been able to reduce our pesticides and reduce our need for tillage. Let the worms do your tillage. And for payment, they eat your residue. It's a win-win, it's going to be out there anyway for them. It helps prevent pollution prevention because it helps buffer and cycle out the chemicals and reduce erosion. But it helps our crop quality and yield by improving the soil structure, water holding and infiltration, nutrient cycling and availability, helps battle pests and disease. Because the more you have out there, the more it's like your line of defense. You need them out there to help protect your crops, and they form symbiotic relationships. So soil biology, it's so neat. We learn more and more all the time, and how plants and soil critters evolve is really interesting. So when plants are growing, they exude sugars and carbohydrates from their roots. Why would they do that? Why would they waste their precious energy, crop, corn, soybeans, small grains, any of them? Why would they waste their energy to exude sugars and carbohydrates into the soil? What's the point? Why are they doing that? They're ringing the dinner bell. They're like, hey, you guys, I'm here. Come help me. They exude those because they have, over thousands and thousands of years worked with the soil organisms, and they're ringing the dinner bell telling them that they're there because the soil organisms will come, consume the sugars, the carbohydrates, defecate, die, eat each other, defecate, die. And within that process, the soil organisms are providing plant available nutrients or bringing them in to battle pests and disease. So during the growing season, the plants will exude different compounds depending on exactly what they need, thus calling different soil organisms. And so if you have a low population of soil organisms and not much diversity of them, your plants, they're going to keep exuding those sugars and carbohydrates, using their energy to do it, ringing the dinner bell, like, where are you guys? I'm here, I need your help. So they're going to expend a lot more energy trying to call them in without a lot of organisms there to come and provide that benefit. Now, if you have the population and the diversity of soil organisms, they'll be right there. Because again, we don't have long ways like we do. It takes them a while to get somewhere. The soil organisms, they build a structure, decompose the residue, they make the nutrients plant available from the soil and organic matter that's in there, and the crop residues on the top. They create various stages of organic matter, which is very important. You need stable organic matter that isn't going to be broke down to help deal with the water infiltration and storage, but you need that fast cycling too, so that you can get those nutrients out of it for your crops. Relationships with plants extend the rooting area. Oh, fungi. So my maiden name is mold, M-O-L-D. Yes, in northern Chicago, that is not a big deal. There are a lot of us. So I was never picked. Well, I was only picked on once. Like the song, guy named Sue. You only have to be picked on once, right? No. So fungi are near and dear to my heart. But it's really cool. So fungi, especially mycorrhizal fungi, they are in the soil, and if we don't disturb it or have very little disturbance, they will connect to our crop roots or vegetation roots, even trees too, and they'll form this huge network under the soil. Do you know what the largest living organism within the soil on the earth, within the earth, is fungus? Because they connect underground to all these plants, and that helps them go grab more air or more water, more nutrients, and sends it along. It's like a super highway. It's really, really, really cool. They work together really well. And we want to think about soil biology like our digestive system. It starts in our mouth with the compounds in our saliva helping to break things down. And then along the way, many different things happen. But what I really want to kind of push is, it's really easy, like when we think about our health. I love pizza, love it. I love junk food. So I eat pizza and junk food all the time, but I take my daily vitamin. I'm good, right? Because I'm getting the nutrients I need in some fashion. But what is that pizza doing to me besides helping me get the shovel on the ground? It's kind of the same way with our soils. If we feed it pizza, which would be really funny, throwing pizza on the ground, we feed it pizza, but give it its daily vitamin, it's not really going to operate optimally for us to grow our crops. So to improve our soil biology, we want to increase organic matter, reduce tillage, protect that soil surface, reduce compaction, have more living roots. We need to feed those little critters to keep them there. Manure is wonderful for them. They love eating that up. Weed pressure. Oh, herbicide resistant weeds. Oh man, how much giant ragweed I pulled last spring into the summer. And I'm allergic to it, but what do? You have to do something, right? So utilizing cover crops can really, really, really help battle or weed pressure, especially with their herbicide resistant weeds. The less you till, the less you incorporate the weed seeds to help them grow. So if they just stay on the soil surface, the sun, the air helps reduce their germination, and those rodents that we hate, I love them to help come and eat those weed seeds. And you leave them on the surface, you're not replanting them. Or have some cereal rye growing out there to give them some competition. Grazing covers. I know who wants to have livestock anymore. We have this battle at my farm too. I want livestock again. We used to be dairy. I don't want to go that far. But to have some grazers out there, that'd be great because you can really get your money back growing cover crops if you graze them and use them for forage value. Downside of that, you got to get them seeded early. And then we have to look at our herbicide program and our herbicide carryover. So there's a lot to it, but even the saliva and the urine and the milk drip from the cattle or goats or whatever you have out there is beneficial to your soil organisms too. So I like putting this up there, benefits of soil health practices. There's a lot. There's actually more than this. But my whole point of this slide is there's a lot. And all of these help with our crop production too. So you find something that you can integrate into your system. How do we do that? Well, we can utilize cover crops, reduce till, all the way to no-till. Small greens are fantastic for the soils. Try to stay out the wet soils. It's hard. Nutrient management, pest management, conversion of pasture or land, grazing cover crops and crop residues. All that increases our soil health, can increase your soil health. There's right and wrong ways to do everything. So I'm not going to get too much into this cover crop thing because TJ is going to really get into that. But cover crops can do so many wonderful things. Wonderful. They can give you headaches too. Everything can be used in the right and the wrong way. So, how do you choose species? How do you determine this? Base it on your objectives. What do you want to accomplish out there? Like, what are your needs? Fit it into your management so it's not this huge hassle that you're trying to implement and it's so different from what you're currently doing. Make it easy. Doesn't have to be hard. Your herbicide program. Not saying to change your herbicide program, but be cognizant of it. I have a handout out there on the table for the University of Wisconsin herbicide rotation restrictions. It shows the half-life of herbicides. Very, very, very important, especially if you are looking at planting your cover crops mid-season or like when you're side dressing. Very, very important to pay attention to that. And then are you going to do winter kill species? Are you going to have to terminate it with herbicide or crimping? Let me tell you, crimping sounds great. You have to have the right timing, right conditions, have a fallback plan. Design tools. You talk to someone like TJ. You talk to someone like myself. Minnesota NRCS, we have a spreadsheet, which is fantastic to come up with some mixes. Green seed tool. I do like their their tool. Oh, they won't. Right. And then Midwest cover crop tool. They all do things a little bit differently. If you come to someone like me, I'm going to use the Minnesota NRCS tool because we have to make sure we meet NRCS standards and specs. TJ also does that because we want to make sure that if you're going to utilize the program, you are set, you have nothing to worry about. Got some common cover crop mixes and a handout out there too. And then how well they do with different common herbicides that we utilize. So if there's an X in there, it's suitable with that herbicide. But the mixes, they're kind of based off of like, is it before beans, before corn? What are your objectives? So I've got some easy mixes out there that all meet NRCS standards and specs. And then if you have a cover crop this fall, how are you going to plant into it this spring? You're going to no-till, strip till, vertical till, plant green. I do not recommend tilling You will hate your life. You will have root balls everywhere. You'll have to go over it 3 to 5 times to get a good seedbed crop. Oh, please do not. If you have cereal rye growing in the spring, don't kill it. Don't kill it. Don't kill it. Tillage management. So many choices, so little time, so little money. If you change your tillage management, you might need to change your nutrient products, your application methods, your planter settings. So, all right, I'm gonna have to go through a little bit faster. No-till. No-till is fantastic. A lot of things to consider when you get into no-till. That's your tillage. Your planter is your tillage. So your planter, instead of worrying about like, oh, I've got my disc ripper, got my chisel plow, got my cultivator, instead of having to worry about all those pieces of equipment and maintaining all of those, you put all that thought and energy into your planter because that is where it's at. Your planter needs to be set right and life will be great. If it's not set right, it'll be very frustrating. Strip till, fantastic, not on hills. Most of you guys are on hilly ground, so strip till is not even something that you want to consider. It can be fantastic. People are talking about reducing the amount of fertilizer they put on, utilizing the system. You're going to do a shank. You're going to do coulter. Big differences. Very expensive. Oh, and actually, I mean, with the shank, you get in there really deep, real deep. So it can be aggressive, but just in your little strips. Vertical till, yeah, I'm kind of biased. I love it as a stepping stone. I love it. Go from conventional tillage down to no-till, love it. Depending on what model you get, you can adjust the angle and the depth. Wonderful. It's really expensive though. But I did talk to a guy yesterday who's buying a used one in great condition for $50,000. Plus, we've got a handout. There's an equipment grant that MDA is putting on right now. So if you guys get my emails, you've seen that. If you don't get emails from me, make sure on the sign-in sheet you put your email down so I can send information like that to you. But they'll pay cover up to 50% of your equipment purchase as long as it's going to increase soil health in Minnesota. So that could be no-till drill, that could be broadcast seeder, it can be lots of different things. This can be great, but it's still tillage, so you're still breaking apart soil aggregation just on the surface. And you can go really fast, 8-9 miles an hour. Yeah, which is kind of nice. Cultivating, more so disturbance. Not too bad for fuel use, but takes a little bit longer. And we're putting, anytime you till, you're putting compaction in right below the layer of your tillage because it's got pushed down on something, left up. So we're getting a little bit of compaction with that. Can cause surface crusting, disking. It all depends on what kind of a disc setup you have. There's so many different kinds, but that can be more aggressive. We can have our surface crusting too. But typically, we need more tillage after that. Chisel plow. I used to love chisel plow. I did. Went from the moldboard plow to the chisel plow. I thought it was fantastic. Well, it is pretty aggressive. I mean, there's a lot of different attachments you can utilize, but goes pretty deep generally, bringing up subsoil to the surface. So, these kind of went in order of, the least to the most disturbance. And remember, we talked about what happens when you disturb the soil. So what do we do with this info? We develop a soil health plan. But we base it on what your objectives are. You want to increase infiltration, increase soil tilt, economics, you weed pest pressure, timeliness, all of that. You look at your current management. What are you currently doing? And then where are the opportunities? How do you fit it in with your current management? You want to look at incremental changes, but ultimately, where do you want to be and how do we work to get you there? You find opportunities. What's your rotation? What's the timing of your nutrient application? What equipment do you have available? What's your planter setup? Sometimes you can have someone custom plant cover crops for you. Sometimes you can utilize a neighbor's no-till planter or drill. Some of the soil waters have them. but there's opportunities out there. So you want to set your goals, inventory and assess your soil, your crop performance, yield profitability, your problem areas, and then work on creating an action plan. And you want to monitor how that's going. And sometimes it's hard because you don't know, is that Mother Nature? Was it the weather that did this? Or, what was the outcome? Easy options. One less tillage pass. One less tillage pass. No-till beans. Beans can handle it. You almost put them on the cement and they'll grow. They can handle it. Reduce till cereal rye after corn, but I know down here we do a lot of cereal rye after beans. That's because we have all the slopes and the hills, so we need some soil protection. Small grains, and if you do small grains, you can put a fantastic cover crop mix in after that. And we have programs, $50 an acre for 1 and 2 species of cover crops, $60 an acre for 3+ species of cover crops. We have programs for you. Use livestock, yours or somebody else's. Cropland Grazing Exchange, like a dating site for crop producers and livestock operators to find each other. We can try to use a legume cover crop to supply a portion of the nitrogen needs. PJ is going to get into that. Farmer perspective. Why did we do it? We have erosion, high inputs, labor, economics, ruts, lack of worms. Funny, there's an older guy. That was actually his reason. He realized that he didn't have any worms out in the soil. Opportunity for something new. Some people don't like new things, some people do. Additional reasons. I love this one. Their wives, their children, their neighbors, and other farmers. We have a huge impact on what's happening with our discussions. I mean, all of you guys, all of us, yeah. Starts with the management changes. Our economic outcomes. This farmer, he does, tells his corn, soybeans, and he does cereal rye after corn. That saves him annually $58 an acre on his soybean acres, $40 an acre on his corn acres. Just making that switch. He reduces nitrogen for his corn because he increases organic matter. And we're not using all that fuel. Wonderful. Ooh, economics and management. So total cost of production, conventional. So this was 2018 and 5 years prior. We're spending $535 an acre to put this in. These are not today's numbers. Obviously, we're a little bit higher. No-till and cover crop, $477 an acre. Net returns, conventional, we're losing $50 an acre. No-till and cover crop, we were making $6.50 an acre. Statewide average. Yields, the yields weren't too different, 206 to 195. But the funny thing is, looking at the yield increases using cover crops, no-till and cover crops. So just cover crops, we saw a 2% increase on corn, 4% on soybeans. No-till and cover crops, 6% increase on corn, 8% increase on soybeans. Telling me the people who started in no-till and cover crops generally had lower yields to begin with. But we can never guarantee yield increases. It depends on how you do it. Because again, we can do it the wrong way. I love this. Sarah has this information. It's in the handout out there. It shows the economic impacts in year 1, year 3, and year 5 on using cover crops and no-till on corn for 5 years. It's awesome. We go from saving $51 a year or per acre a year, year 1, year 5, we're saving $90 an acre per year. Yield increases, well, the same as what was going on before. The first year, we didn't really see much. Year 3, 1.5% corn, 3.5% on soybeans. Year 5, 3% on corn, almost 5% on beans. There's more than one way to eat a pie. What works for one person may not work for another. Start small, start easy. Cost savings, fuel, labor, wear and tear on equipment, herbicides, fertilizer inputs. Other benefits, timeliness, reducing rutting, building your organic matter. You need the sprayer to come in. If you have nice, even fields covered with residue that isn't rutted up, it's not muddy, those sprayers can get in and out of there quickly. The co-op loves spraying on our fields because they don't move around. They stay right on track and they can zoom right through. Risk. There's always risk. changing, trying something new. So we want to help mitigate that. You guys have a lot of things on your plate to consider and deal with. But how do you proceed? You talk with the other guys that are doing what you want. See how it's going for them. What have they gone through? Learn from them so you don't have to make the same mistakes. Talk with your local conservation staff. We talk and work with a lot of farmers. We can help work with you to get programs, small steps. One change can have a multiple year consequence for the good and the bad.